I'm Michael Strong, host of When School's Not Working. I'm the founder of Expanse, a virtual program for children 8 and above designed to develop and to discover and develop your child's unique genius. We work with children who are intellectual, creative, and entrepreneurial, many of whom hate school, like I do. With that, I'll hand it off to Kath Fraise, who's founder of 100 Roads. So Kath, tell us about you and your projects, and then introduce our guests.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Michael. So I'm Catherine Fraise, founder of, as Michael said, 100 Roads, which is our research and development company for co-learning. I created Workspace Education, which is a co-learning space for families so they could create the education that they wanted for their children. And now we are creating 3D virtual online spaces for teenagers right now. So doing a lot of interesting, innovative things there. And I'm very happy to introduce you to our two guests, our two college students and soon to be ex-college students who have decided to leave college because they want to meet the moment, and what they're seeing is missing out there, which is we've got a situation where children are not very engaged in a lot of the online learning they're doing, and they want to create something really awesome to get these kids engaged again in this subject that's so important in math. And I'm very excited for them to share what they've been doing. So we have Ed Radion, give us a big wave, Ed, and Jake Melman-Rogers. They are from University of Virginia, and I know that Ed got some great news today that he actually got a great job in financial management, but he decided to defer that to really dive deep into this project and to get it off the ground and hopefully start this fantastic new company online with his friend here, Jake. And I know that they've got another colleague that they're working with as well. And Jake is studying Spanish and economics, I believe. And he's passionate about criminal justice and taking care of the environment, but also very much cares about education and putting something into the marketplace to really help these children stay engaged in their work. So I'm very, very excited to talk to them today and to introduce you so you can see just how much potential our youth has and how much that are learning actually outside the school system.
Amazing. Catherine, Michael, thank you guys for having us. We've been looking forward to tonight.
Great. So maybe we can start off by saying that, you know, you're in college, you're both doing well, you've got a lot of potential to get great jobs out there in the marketplace, yet you've decided that you really want to make a difference in the world and start a company that's really meeting the moment of what you're seeing out there. So let's start there and tell us why you're interested in taking that risk, which, you know, which is brave of you, I think. So let's hear what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Ed, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Redwood. And, you know, the story of Redwood really is kind of a personal story. Like a lot of students, I didn't think I'd be going to college until late. So it was actually freshman year of high school where I decided, you know, maybe I kind of want to go to college. I grew up the youngest of 8 kids in a first-gen American family. And so, you know, that really wasn't on my radar. And so when I decided to go to college, I was at a point where, you know, I really wanted to focus on learning more about finance and investing because I saw that as something, you know, really interesting and stimulating. But last summer, I was, you know, making financial models and spreadsheets while I kept on seeing article after article come out showing how, you know, as soon as schools closed, you saw a direct correlation widen, showing how, you know, for the top 10% of families on the socioeconomic spectrum, sure, every student dipped a little bit, but, you know, for the best families, effectively, they're already doing better than they did pre-pandemic. But when you look at the majority of students and students like myself, there is no remediation. It's kind of a downward line right now. And so I saw that and had this moment where I was like, well, you know, if I would have been born or younger during this time, would I still be here today? And I don't think I would be. And so since then, we started in October, incorporated as a company in February, and we've been moving extremely quickly. We've put our app on the App Store about a week and a half ago, and we're testing with a small group of beta testers. But, you know, I think as you mentioned earlier, Catherine, actually, you know, 2 hours ago, I got an email from the human resources department of the investment bank I'm slated to start at. And, you know, I asked to defer a year, to defer my start date because, you know, this is very timely. We don't know how much longer schools will stay closed. And even if schools start opening up, there will be families who opt not to take the vaccine. And so we're expecting a hybrid learning environment, at least for the next couple of months and into the next school year. And so one thing that makes me take the risk is knowing that it's going to be a fragmented and not a seamless hybrid and in-person experience. So the virtual learners are not going to have the same experience as those in person. And so we're hoping to do everything we can to build virtual content that is engaging for all students, whether they're in the classroom or still at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. And I think, you know, the other thing to take into account is that, especially in mathematics, you know, these learning gaps are not going to be filled with the vaccine. Because math builds on itself. You know, if kids don't learn how to multiply, you know, they're not going to learn algebra. They're not going to learn geometry, calculus, and you know that's a tough proposition to look at. But I guess for me personally, I was in school up until, you know, I finished my fall semester in 2020 at the University of Virginia, and at that point we were, you know, very much involved in this company, and then we only started it in October. So over winter break, we just kind of sprinted and working, you know, almost constantly during winter break. And I was like, oh man, like I'm working so much now. If I take classes, like it's going to be game over for me, game over for our company. And I also knew that Ed had this job offer, a great job. And, you know, so in order for this thing to work, we really needed to make a time crunch. And so I decided that taking this semester off is the best approach. And I, you know, really, honestly, I hope my parents aren't watching this, but I'm not really in any rush to get my degree. Yeah.
Right. And why aren't you in a rush? Like, it seems like most people really, you know, parents are pushing their kids to do four years in a row. Do you really think that you need to do it like that? Or do you think you could be working and maybe do half a college worth of classes, you know, while you're working? Do you have to actually be doing this full year?
No, I mean, definitely not. I don't think. And I think honestly, in some ways, it's almost better to take a gap year, take a gap semester, because then you kind of leave your university and, you know, come back with new experiences, new perspectives, you know, things to add to that community, and you appreciate it more too.
So I'd like to understand more clearly exactly what you're doing. There are thousands of ed tech companies out there. How exactly is your product or service different from, you know, the many other ed tech companies?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so we're the only and first augmented reality math adventure game on the App Store. And, you know, really this is a new space. And augmented reality, what it is using just your device. So it could be a tablet or a phone, and it basically augments virtual objects onto your camera frame. So you're in an environment that you're familiar with. You're learning 3D concepts in 3D. And so the big differentiator there is, you know, when you look at the ed tech industry from, you know, 1,000-foot level, we've seen some awesome innovations that have actually helped learning. One of which is, you know, adaptive learning. You know, artificial intelligence can now say, you know, Jake, for instance, is struggling with fractions. I'm struggling with long division or whatever the subject might be. And so we can adapt learning. That's good. Another innovation that we've seen is gamification. And so there are ways to incentivize students with learning. And so, you know, you see Prodigy Math, you even see Minecraft moving into education. So really trying to make learning more enjoyable. However, students are still struggling with visuospatial and mental rotation skills. And that means basically, you know, what is actually a 3D shape? And so even with the existing technology that we have, we are fundamentally constrained by two-dimensional screens and pieces of paper. And so what are our current options, right? We can draw a circle on a 2D piece of paper with a dotted line and shade it and say that's a sphere. You know, next week we're going to be taking the circumference of said object, but we might not even know what it looks like in 3 dimensions. And what we're doing is, you know, we saw that early math is fundamentally about spatial awareness skills. And so by teaching 3-dimensional concepts in 3 dimensions in environments that are familiar to students, we're hoping that we're not only providing a more engaging learning material, but also a pedagogically superior method of instruction for those foundational spatial skills.
Yeah, and I think the other point that is that you talked a little about gamification, and you see a lot of ed tech products right now, and yeah, they're gamified, but you know, the metaphor that I like to use is they're covering broccoli in chocolate rather than just like putting the veggies in the fruit smoothie. So by that I mean, like, you know, you might answer a basic long division or, you know, multiplication question or something, you get a certain amount of points, you go and attack a monster, and it's just completely unrelated. The two have nothing to do with each other. And so that's, you know, what that's doing is trying to make math more palatable rather than actually making it enjoyable.
So I can certainly see rotating 3D objects using AR as something that would help children understand. Is that sort of your core experience, or is that one of many kind of examples?
Yeah, so, you know, on the App Store, what you'd find right now is where we're starting. We have kindergarten through second grade and some fourth grade aligned content. So we have adventure mode where there's a 3D world map, and there are 9 different regions, and you explore each region. So you have Camp Redwood, Forest World, Glacier World, Mountain World, Desert World, Jungle World, and so on and so forth. A lot of cool different worlds where each one asks you questions that are not just math. And so, yes, we are aligned. We're counting by ones. We're skip counting. And then that's the first mode. But also you're going to learn things like, you know, what is nocturnal, right? What does a tiger do at night? Does it hunt or does it sleep? So that's kind of a contextual problems baked in there as well. That's the first mode, adventure mode. It's kind of that map. The other mode is pattern mode. And we basically have a 3x3 grid, and it's filled up with objects like different 3D shapes. So like a cone, a sphere, whatever it is. And then there's a missing one. So it's like identify the next shape in the pattern. And that question is really like those types of spatial reasoning skills are still taught on IQ tests, on the LSAT, on the GMAT. And so these are like kind of lifelong skills that we're trying to train in addition to aligning to the Common Core.
Mm-hmm. And so, you know, that makes sense. And then is there vision for taking this much broader to many other places, either in math or elsewhere?
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. Down the line, you know, we want complete pre-K through 12 coverage, and even moving into college subjects where it might be useful, and, you know, even onto upskilling and reskilling. I mean, if we look at the idea that, you know, the fact that so many of our jobs in the coming years are going to be automated, we're really going to need to upskill. We're going to need to be upskilling and reskilling a lot of workers to keep people employed.
Yeah, and so what we're looking at is we're starting in K-5, and we want to grow up with these users, and we want to provide them over the years increasingly complex material outside of math. I mean, the greatest part about augmented reality is that now imagine learning anatomy, for example, what a heart looks like or what a cell looks like. Anything can be three-dimensional, and so there's a lot of potential to expand away from math as well.
Is there, would you say it's all kind of exploratory, or is there some kind of evaluation or assessment, or, you know, I guess I'm wondering, to what extent is this sort of a cool enrichment activity versus to what extent do you think teachers are going to use it to cover curriculum?
Yeah, and that's a question we've been asking ourselves. Right now, it's definitely more of a practice than it is assessment, simply because we don't have breadth of coverage. So we started this thing pretty recently, and we want to partner actually with educators who could see the potential for this into their classrooms. And when we think about building out our curriculum, we could do it ourselves, but at the same time, we would much rather have teacher input on every stage of the way, saying, I could see this application and getting the lift there. But right now, basically it's enrichment. We're trying to optimize for engagement right now, something that's interesting, and then, build out that curriculum as we go. But yeah, definitely a work in progress.
Mm-hmm. Did you raise any capital, or are you guys doing all the coding yourselves?
Yeah, so right now we have not raised any round of capital yet. We are entering that process right now. With sort of the money that we've thrown together, we paid for an outsourced development team, and we also have done a good amount of the tech stuff in-house as well with the two of us and a couple of our other partners.
Do you have a minimum viable product that people have played around with?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And kids love it?
So actually, mixed reactions. That's the thing we realized. It's like, look, overnight success is going to take years. And so I was in my head, we're designing this thing. We spent all day with it. We're like, of course it's going to be great. And so inevitably, we're getting some feedback is great, and that's like makes us happy. But then advice we got from other entrepreneurs from day one is like, okay, the people who say, great job, this is amazing, don't listen to them, like filter that out. But the people who hate it, listen really intently. And so, yeah, I mean, I come from a big family and I have a lot of nephews and nieces, and then had just phone calls where they're like, this is boring. I'm like, okay, great. Like, let's fix it. And so working with a lot of students to make it more engaging, we have an update rolling out in the next few days on the App Store, which should address most of the feedback that we've given. So hopefully that improves it a little bit, but incrementally, we're just listening to our user base, what they want, and we're building out.
And what kind of changes are they requesting? Is it kind of faster paced or different content, or what are they telling you?
Yeah, so definitely one of which was ease of use, because augmented reality is, kind of a relatively novel technology. You have to physically move your phone around, let it calibrate on a flat surface. And so that's the first part, is just trying to make all of the augmented reality experience more seamlessly integrated into the game. And second is, we really needed like a how to play Redwood screen, like a tutorial. So we didn't have that until this update. And a couple of other things. I mean, we've heard some parents say like, oh, this 3D model of this ant, like we had a scary squirrel, that, scared a kid. And so we're like, okay, like it's a real live squirrel, but now we have a more cartoony character of it. And so that's okay. Like just things like that. Whatever it is, it's like, we're not building this for ourselves. So we'll listen.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's important to address is that, neither of us are teachers, and we're not game designers either. So, we can't expect to, knock it out of the park as soon as you release. What it is pretty cool, but we're continuing to iterate, continuing to just, improve, and that's really all you can do.
That's really a great mindset. And speaking of that, I was thinking that, young entrepreneurs often join an incubator or some kind of entrepreneurial outfit that can give you the advice and help you launch your product. Have you joined one of those, or is that something that you have in mind?
Yeah, so we're really fortunate to have been accepted into UVA's Darden School of Business, their flagship accelerator. And so that's going to be a summer-long program where kind of they split it into like UVA, which is like understand, validate, and then accelerate. And so getting a lot of mentorship there, but definitely to all, budding founders, apply to competitions, like apply to a ton of competitions, apply to incubators, accelerators, because there's actually a lot of money and resources looking for founders trying to solve real problems.
How much capital are you going to raise?
That's a good question. So we are getting ready to raise a small FFF round to kind of just get us through that summer, through that accelerator program, so we can then raise a bigger round of capital with better terms. But it's all moving parts right now, because things can definitely change over the next 6 months or so before we raise that seed round. And so this early round is not going to be a ton of money, but somewhere between 60 and 100K.
Well, that's a ton of money for a lot of people. No, that's great. All right, so you've got this great app, and is that the only product that you're going to be making at Redwood, or do you have a sort of a long-term vision, or are you just going to do the app first, see if it's a thing and that it takes off, and then you're going to go forward? Or is this a sort of a direction that you see yourself in for a long time in education?
Yeah, and to answer that, I'd say there's serious need for lifelong learning products, products that can teach you counting, literacy, numeracy, and can take you all the way up through complex subjects. And so we want to have everything in-house under one roof. We already know parents and teachers have a million different apps, a million different emails to keep track of. And so we want to have kind of one centralized learning platform that's adaptive and that can also take students from lessons as simple as shape identification to, long-term doing multivariable calculus. I mean, you're looking at, for instance, multivariable calculus, it's a three-dimensional subject, but still, we're on these 2D pieces of paper and we're drawing an X, a Y, and a Z axis. And so, so many ways we can tap into and facilitate the intellectual curiosity of students. And, part of that is just about, what does the learning science show us, right? You can't force learning. The students must come to the learning. Students must be at the center of their learning, driven by genuine curiosity. And so that's what we're trying to do, kind of build a single platform where you can go in and learn at your level. And what we're very excited about is we're currently only on iOS, so just Apple devices, iPads, and iPhones. However, we're building on Unity now, and we want to be cross-platform to be on Chromebooks as well as for Android. And the cool thing, Unity is kind of this like video game code language that's morphed into a larger ecosystem for developing, and it's that same code can be used for Facebook's Oculus. And so as the cost of hardware for virtual reality decreases, we hope to be in that space as a first mover as well, because AR is incredible. You get the benefits of mixed reality, kind of taking the physical world and the virtual world and kind of interfacing them. So you can do that on your phone, but there are much more, fun and engaging ways to do it. And so, in a couple of years, we do want to be in virtual reality as well, especially, Oculus has some pretty awesome technology coming out. So hopefully on the Quest 3 is when we'll be releasing on VR.
And what's your revenue model and your customer target?
Yeah, definitely. So we came into this and we're like, okay, we don't want a single parent or a student having to pay for their learning, because we believe that it's the responsibility of a school district to cover all of a child's learning. I mean, that's where our tax dollars are going. And so we tried to, sell to school districts, but then we heard so many horror stories of edtech entrepreneurs, right? And for reference, it takes about 3 to 4 months to get into a public school system. And that's assuming you have a product.
Mm-hmm.
So, we heard the story of an edtech founder who basically got his school districts to 4 months later say, all right, we're ready to pay. And then he's like, well, we have a different product completely. And so what we're doing is we're going B2C freemium. So business to consumer, we're going straight to parents, and we're going to start charging once we feel comfortable charging. And so right now there's just not enough content. There's not enough value adds, and we're still testing. And so hopefully by June, we would have a $7.99 a month subscription where really it could be kind of the base of your elementary math learning, where you'd also get, real-time assessment and diagnostics on how you're measuring up to your class, how you're measuring up relative to these standards that we want you to perform on. And then, what we also want to do as part of that paid subscription is we want to empower parents. So we've spoken to, roughly 200 parents, teachers, educators, and school leaders and professors in the past 2-3 months. And what we've learned is that, even if it's a learning product, parents still don't want their kids glued to the screen. We get that. And so when we get to that stage in development where we start charging, we're actually going to give parents the ability to set daily screen time limits, because the learning happens off the screen, but we just want to be that spark of curiosity.
Mm-hmm. So parents would pay $7.99 a month, and gradually you would have more and more content, and so it's a better and better deal.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And how are you going to market it?
Yeah, Jake.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting question. So we really rely on grassroots marketing, early on, and right now, because our product is still in its early stage, it's out there for people to use and hopefully enjoy. But we sort of haven't been marketing as much as we plan to in the future. But we have a partnership with Anything Academic. If any of you viewers are familiar or unfamiliar with them, check them out. They have a ton of awesome resources on their website. And also with one of our friends who runs a marketing company called Glacier Marketing. And it's essentially social media and influencer marketing. And he's been, both of these two groups have been, kind enough to strike a deal with us and make it as, give us the friendliest terms that they possibly can.
Yeah. And, just talking to a lot of parents, what we learn is how do you find a new learning product? What are the ways you go about doing it? And so there are 3 main ways where kind of parents find new learning products. First of which is word of mouth. Obviously, like a friend tells you hey, this is a really cool app, try it out. Or, just a playground conversation. Second is Facebook. So we've been very active on Facebook, joining a lot of groups, trying to talk to these communities and understand what's going on. Third one is recommended by teachers, but we're targeting the homeschool market specifically, just because, what we've learned is that these homeschool parents are already pioneers in their children's education. They're far more willing to try new innovative ways of learning, more likely to take risks because these are people who've been self-teaching and they've been in this community for longer. And so, we are focusing on also solving the needs for neurodiverse learners. And we're very deliberate about trying to solve for this niche first. I mean, these are gifted learners. These are twice exceptional learners, gifted, who might also have a learning disability. And then in general, I mean, anybody whose brain is differently wired, like they need a lot of stimulation, right? Like, and if you're a gifted student, for example, what we've learned from a parent is that it's such a misconception to say that if a student is gifted, they're now lucky, they're now privileged. False, because 1 to 2% of the US population tests gifted, right? But 20% of the incarcerated population tests gifted. And we look at that and we say, whoa, because the costs of disengagement are extremely high. So I was one of those kids who was, in the principal's office pretty much every other day. And I was disengaged, I was bored. And so really for the needs of neurodiverse learners, the need for challenging content that is incredibly engaging is not being met. I mean, especially in a math context. We've heard from parents who say, they throw the iPad at mom because ABC Mouse isn't fun, or maybe Prodigy Math might not be as exciting anymore. So that's kind of where we're at. I mean, we're really focusing on these pioneers, these first movers in learning tools. So oftentimes it's these homeschool parents and the parents of neurodiverse learners, because we care a lot about those students, because there is no one size fits all for education. That's not working. And we could talk about that subject as well, but certainly we think that technology can provide a more engaging and personalized experience.
You're saying that that you didn't like school, like that you're at the principal's office, that a lot of the content didn't work for you, Jake, the way it was done, because you're a highly active person. So you managed to stay in there though, right? Like, what damage do you think that has done for you? Or do you think there's any damage, or did you just persevere and get through that? Or what made you put up with that situation? So a lot of different angles there.
You're Ed. I guess I'll go. I mean, yeah, so I very much have ADD, and I mean, actually, I wouldn't say that I didn't like school. I actually really liked going to school, seeing my teachers, my friends, but it's just class. I mean, I could not sit through it. It was constantly 5 minutes in, I'd be looking at the clock, doodling, like, and I'd, walk out of a 50-minute class and be like, oh man, like I paid attention for like maybe 5 or 6 of those minutes. And, that it doesn't seem like a big deal, but, then when you get home and you're cramming to kind of catch up on all the stuff that you spaced out on, it causes a lot of stress. So I think that's one way in particular, how schools, could definitely improve, is just by recognizing that, just because a kid isn't paying attention, it doesn't mean that they're like not interested. It doesn't mean that they don't like care.
So it sounds like you loved your friends, right? You loved your teachers, right? Mm-hmm. You were happy about the content, really. I mean, like the subject, it was just the way it couldn't keep you engaged. So if you were to think of a learning environment or a way to learn where you would have been engaged 100% of the time, what do you think that could have looked like?
Yeah, and to answer that question, I think it's important to step back and realize that human learning has existed way before the existence of the schoolhouse and the current model that we're in right now. And so learning, and this is Montessori, Holt, this is Gray, as when work becomes play, that is when we learn. And when work is no longer play, that's when the learning stops. And so you see that you can't force somebody to learn something, really. I mean, they might cram for an exam, they might maybe even cheat on that exam, and the next day they forget all the content that they learned. And so when I envision that, that ideal learning system, instead of like in the confines of an education system, to me, it really looks like one where students are exploring. And the other thing is social learning is a really key component as well. I mean, when students are sharing collective curiosity, that's when the learning happens. And so, I mean, just a lot less punitive. I mean, there's something about the way we're accustomed to think about education where go to the principal's office. You're wrong. You're not paying attention in class. Like, you know, here's a punishment. No, it's I think a lot more, Michael, I think of what the work you're doing, it can probably answer this question much better than we can, but definitely play. That's what learning is.
Yeah, and I think another part of it for me is just like you know, that's you know, awesome. We can think about the big picture in the future, but in terms of like really actionable steps that we can take right now, you know, the school day should start not at 8 a.m. You know, that's not, especially in high school, when teenagers can you know, transport themselves and they can figure that out themselves. There's no reason why they should be coming in at 8 a.m. Some of them waking up at 6:30. You know, we have a generation of chronically sleep deprived students. And I mean, the other thing is just understanding that students have varying attention spans. You know, a lot of kids, they can't pay attention for, you know, hour and a half long class, 50 minutes, 45 minutes. Like, it just doesn't work that way. And teachers and administrators need to sort of be understanding and accommodating to that.
Mm-hmm.
Did either of you know any kind of unschoolers or alt schoolers or self-directed educated students? You know,
We've talked to a handful of unschooling parents.
Mm-hmm.
But when you were growing up, did you just accept the system?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I enjoyed the system. So it was like, you know, caused me some stress on the back end, having to, you know, study and cram for tests and everything. But yeah, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm. So how do we help parents and students escape those that are unhappy? What do you see a kind of process through which, you know, the ones who are happy, let them stay, good for them. But there are many that are unhappy. How do we help them escape?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much funding right now, especially with the CARES Act. There's a lot of funding for education technology. And so maybe the call here is I don't expect that there's going to be change from the top. I think that we're in an extremely slow moving bureaucracy when it comes to our education system, and that genuinely, I think it starts from the bottom. And so kids being excited so when we say technology, like tech itself is never the solution. The benefit of technology is to scale quickly and cheaply non-tech solutions that work. And so the example is that homeschooling parent who teaches fractions by saying, okay, we're going to bake cookies, pour me a half cup of flour, right? Mm-hmm. That is the type of learning that technology can actually scale to every household and every family. And so I think that schools just need to adopt technology a lot faster. And it might be hard to ask of teachers to familiarize themselves with new products. But in the same time, I think that there is funding out there, and I think there needs to be more deliberate focus on innovation within education. And it's really hard sometimes to change culture of school districts. But yeah, I think definitely innovation accepted from the bottom that works is one way to broadly give everybody equal access to the same education. So everybody's using Zoom, right? I mean, we're on Zoom right now. And when we think about that, it's like, okay, well, here's a enterprise business product for conferencing to have meetings. And for some reason, we think that 6-year-olds can perform equally as well using this software than a traditional classroom. I mean, that is kind of the current state of where we're at. And I think that if, you know, across all levels, we shifted the culture to more embrace technology that can personalize the learning of every student, we can start to see real results. For instance, high stakes exams, I hope are a thing of the past. I hope that in 5 to 10 years, we will shy away from that, because technology can do real-time assessment at any given second. If they're using a tech platform, we can know what they're struggling in, what these students are good at. And I think that test anxiety as a concept is one of those things that haunts students, and now students associate education with learning. And I think there's a real problem, because, you know, learning is now seen as something as work, you know, to be avoided at all costs. But I don't know if that answered the question at all. But
there's lots more to dig into, but just on the assessment, you know, certainly adaptive software can assess students, but your AR thing, I don't see how that's going to assess students. How do you want to, or have you thought about how you're going to incorporate some kind of assessment into your product?
Yeah, 100%. You know, that is this year, we want to start building out adaptive learning, and, you know, that would be in part, you know, developing our own algorithm to say, okay, what are students struggling with? How can we map that? How can we display that information to parents so that parents know exactly which skills? And we are aligning it to the Common Core, not because we believe that, you know, the Common Core is education like how it should be, but rather because school districts care about it. And we need that alignment in order to be in school districts. But I mean, we are building out an adaptive learning platform. We have to. I mean, if we would be ridiculous to pretend that if we would be repeating the same mistakes of big box classrooms if we didn't have adaptive learning. So that's something we're actively building out right now.
But I guess my struggle is, you know, I can see rotating a 3D object in AR, totally cool. But, you know, assessing long division, it just seems so different. I'm kind of stuck with, you know, kind of traditional curriculum and its assessment on the one hand, and the cool possibilities of AR. I'm not saying they're not unbridgeable, but I don't yet quite understand the bridge.
Yeah, so I mean, we would be lying to you if we told you that we've built that bridge. But the thing, I mean, I guess where the first place in my head goes is saying, you know, all right, we have these quests in our game, and once we build those out, each of those will be aligned and you know, categorized in one or many Common Core objectives, and then you kind of see how many of those questions in each quest were answered correctly and incorrectly. You can track improvement. You can, you know, track all sorts of analytics and kind of go from there.
And, you know, philosophically, we think we should be using the most powerful calculators possible in the classrooms. I think it is ridiculous that we say, here's a TI-84, you can't use anything more advanced. Long division should be obsolete, to answer your question directly, right? Because, you know, when I was a student, right, my teacher was like, oh, in 10, you're not gonna have a calculator with you at all times. Frankly, in 10 years, you're gonna have a calculator in your brain. Neuralink is rapidly developing. This is the pace of technology. And so how do we teach long division? Division is just part whole. How do we understand the concept of, you know, something, a small part breaking off into a different, how do we measure that, right? Maybe what is the effect of what's going on? And, you know, Wolfram Alpha is never going to tell you when to integrate, why to integrate, what are the challenges of integrating. So, I mean, what we're going to do as we build out our curriculum is, you know, we're absolutely going to empower our users with really powerful calculators and say, here are really cool ways to abstractly understand what's going on. It's not that regurgitation of formulas. I mean, quadratic formula is great, but at the end of the day, we don't want any of our users to be saying, when am I going to use this in life? Because we want everything to be tied to life.
What's tricky is, a quick thought, Catherine, and then I'll let you go. I am kind of hearing a little bit of vacillation between, on one hand, kind of radical curiosity, interest-based learning about stuff that actually matters. And then on the other hand, and school district compatible, Common Core, you know, even the standards. And it feels like there's a little bit of schizophrenia going on there.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we think can be done. We see that only as a technical problem. And you know, we're not going to do it alone. It really takes a village. And so that's what we're after. It's a really big challenge, but we think it needs to be done. It needs to be done because classrooms should be looking like that in the first place. And so hopefully that's the way to drive change.
And this is actually a pretty, you know, formative idea in, you know, the early stages of our company. And I told Ed, I'm like, man, you know, video games kind of makes me think of when I was in middle school and you know, early high school, really liked playing FIFA. And after playing FIFA for, you know, 4 or 5 months, I could tell you the names of every player, you know, the country they're from, all their stats, whether they're right-footed or left-footed, their club, you know, everything. And that knowledge, that information isn't inherently more interesting, you know, unless you're kind of a soccer nut, unless you're inherently more interesting than math. Sorry, I just had a little brain fart there. So if we could just use a fun game and learning is kind of like math knowledge is kind of the byproduct of that game. You know, there's a lot of potential there. We just need to figure out how to do that. So
what I really love about what you're doing is, you know, I'm a Montessori teacher and, you know, I was so in love with math and how Montessori did math that I learned how they did the math from the age of 3 all the way up through high school with the best, you know, Montessori mathematicians that I could find. And they have the most amazing materials that are all in 3D. and they go material by, little small steps all the way through the math curriculum. And they're doing, the binomial cube, which has got a lot of little pieces. It's all 3D. When they're doing it with their hands and they're moving all these pieces in the classroom. And I feel like that you have potential, because you can't really do a binomial cube 2D, right? And so that younger children would really understand it. But you probably could do that with AR. But then the challenge, and so I think that's great, because all of Montessori's concepts that she was teaching, they're all in these 3D, models that you could potentially use to do some activities on your app. And then the other challenge would be then to apply that knowledge. So maybe they get the knowledge about what a cube is, for example, but then do they get any opportunity to apply that knowledge doing something or answering some questions or going on a quest using that knowledge in some format on the app?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question. And so right now the answer is no. We're still very early stage, just kind of got our minimum viable product out there in the App Store. But, in the future, absolutely. I think that, where a lot of potential comes here is, we have this idea of, manipulatives, right? Like the little cubes or the 10, I don't know exactly what they're called. But, if you have those, and then now you can put them into AR, and you can, not only count them and, do exercises with them, you can, blow them up, shrink them, spin them, use them to build different things. And then, especially AR, then you can have, augmented reality, ways to measure measure volume, measure surface area, all that kind of stuff. And it's really, there are a lot of possibilities, a lot of ways we can go down that road.
We've got a question from Facebook. Someone is asking, does being happy in school equate to an appropriate and progressive education? Some students are great test takers, but struggle to apply those concepts to real-world situations.
Yeah, would love to kind of take a stab at that. And that's a really good question. I think that the tests are testing on a wrong measuring stick in the first place. There are value judgments that we're saying that these, that long division is important, that these non-calculatable ways of doing math are important. And so, I think being happy in school does not necessarily equate to an appropriate and progressive education, because we're limited by our current understanding of what school is. And what it can be. And so I think there's always room for improvement there, but it's so common, right? Students take a test and they're like, okay, when am I going to use this in life? It's just the way we test. Definitely, I think if you look at, like, one example I give is in the elementary school curriculum, it's basically classrooms are split, like time-wise, like 50-50 between math and ELA, right? But what we're failing to see is that, like, English and language arts, instead of saying, okay, like, circle the main idea, highlight all the nouns, right? Like, what's more important is that social studies is reading, right? History is reading. There are so many embedded subjects. And for instance, science relies on math itself, so that when we teach math and ELA at early ages, we should definitely be adding more contextual knowledge. I think I read a statistic somewhere where it's like the average first grade classroom spends like 15 minutes a day on social studies / history. And so I think focusing education on things that really matter is maybe a first step to start applying it to real world concepts. But definitely understand the struggle, because, like, what are we testing on right now, right? A lot of problems there.
So I'm very big on reading, and one thing about AR is it seems visual. Have you thought about how to integrate developing reading and reading fluency with your AR systems?
We've definitely thought about that. And then there are a couple companies now that are sort of using AR to kind of augment stories, like kids' books and just standard books. But one of the things that we're doing actually right now is there are a lot of there are a lot of words that we have in the game. And what we realized is that a lot of students, well, we realized this pretty early on, is that a lot of students in our target age group, have difficulty reading or can't read, for visually impaired, dyslexia, haven't learned how yet, plenty of reasons. And so what we're doing is we're partnering with our friend Kemba Barnes. She runs Reading with Kemba, which is an awesome platform, and she's our voice actress. So we're working towards, the next couple of versions. We want a comprehensive text-to-speech feature. So, a student could see the question that's posed on their phone or on their tablet, and then click a little button and hear Kemba sort of read that aloud and have the, it would trace along the syllables. So hopefully, that's something that we can do really early on, and that we will do to maybe bump up that literacy.
So there would be kind of little labels and questions and headings and titles and that kind of thing with integrated with the AR content.
Yeah, and the other thing is, once we build out our adaptive learning, what we want to do, we also know that if you're learning about something you're interested in, like if I like dinosaurs and Jake likes planets, then I'm going to much rather read a book about dinosaurs, and he's going to want to learn about the planets. And so once we can basically internally find out what students are interested in based on their interaction with that subject, right? How much time they spend learning about dinosaurs, right? What we then want to do is, when we teach literacy, we're not going to give them random passages, right? We're not going to give everybody the same thing. Literacy is a lot harder to teach than numeracy, we think, just because there's more debate on how to teach literacy. But where we're at is, when we start doing that, we want to make sure that what our users are reading is actually what they want to learn more about. And so definitely want to be kind of like a vehicle for that curiosity. And so with adaptive learning, we can do that.
You told us earlier about the things the kids didn't like about your platform. Were there any wins when you tested it with the kids? Were there any things they say, whoa, that's cool, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we got this. It's so cool. I mean, this stuff definitely keeps us going. We got an email from someone we've spoken to, and he's like, yeah, like my 7-year-old daughter came into my office with her hand out, and she's like, Redwood, I want to play again. And there is engagement, right? So obviously it's really easy for us to be hard on ourselves and say it's never enough, it's not good enough. It never will be in our eyes, right? But there are small wins, 100%. And what we find is that to be empowering is when we speak to a parent and we listen to what their kids like, for instance, hammerhead sharks or chickens, and then we actually put those into the game. That's cool. And so when we're thinking about what we want to build these next few months, we want to get the community involved, because this isn't our game, right? And so hopefully we get more wins just by getting more ideas and listening to what people want to see in this product.
When you just think of the popularity of Pokemon Go, and obviously that's because of the characters and so forth, but still done right, I could imagine kids really getting into this. And right now, do they use the Google Cardboard, or they're holding the phone with their hands, or what are they using?
Yeah, just the phone. No other hardware than what you have in your pocket. And with that, they kind of walk around their room. They set a little launch pad on a flat surface, and all the learning happens in that confined area. And so it's not you have to walk a mile to go pick something else. There's no movement or geotagging yet. We want to do that. But yeah, that's basically it. It's kind of 3D learning so far. What we've built is kind of our starting off point. And now the big question for everyone is, what can we do with this? Where should we go with this? We want to build a community driven learning game, and we're just trying our hardest to listen.
Mm-hmm.
It does seem like it'd be great to get a big chunk of capital, both for production and marketing at some point. You might be able to kind of bootstrap this, but at some point, I think you'll want some capital.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kath.
No, just
we're realizing that.
Definitely.
So just like to us, obviously you guys know what you're doing. You've been in it 24/7. It sounds like for quite a number of months. Tell us how much you think you're learning from this process, as opposed to being, let's say, in a traditional learning environment. And if a parent has a child who's very entrepreneurial and is dying to start something, what would you say to parents? Should they let their child do that now, or should they say, no, wait till they finish high school? even if they're not happy there, or maybe it doesn't matter if they take a year off during high school, or what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it depends on the student. You know, if they're the kind of student that's you know, self-driven and you know, has the support network where they can make that happen, and you know, I would say go for it. Definitely in college, you know, I think that it's really worthwhile taking a little bit of time off of college just to, you know, give yourself a little bit of perspective, learn some new stuff. And to your first question, I've learned an unbelievable amount, like in the past 6 months. I mean, it's all different stuff too. You know, I've had to do, you know, learn some finance stuff, some legal stuff, some game design, you know, people skills. I mean, like you name it. It's been like I've had to wear so many hats.
The other thing I'd say, and I guess if anyone in the audience has a finance background, which is pretty interesting. So, you know, obviously studied finance all of college, worked in finance, and one thing that is happening like right now is this really big trend. And so it's that there's so much money that's being invested right now. That means returns are going down. And so you have never seen this much money funneled towards new ideas. Like the average round of, say, a pre-seed raise, right, went from like 250 to 500,000 in 2016, and now it's up to $1 million, right? So nearly double the amount of money is coming in towards ideas. So that's the first part, is there has never been as much money for new ideas in history. Second, it has never been easier to build a company in history. You don't need to learn how to code to build a working product. And so that's the awesome thing. So there's Webflow and Bubble, and these are no code platforms where you literally drag and drop and you can build a functional website to test your idea. You can go online, apply to competitions. Really, I'd say, you know, if a student has an idea, the first thing you need to do before you build any code, before you spend any money, is just go out and talk to 100 people who are affected by that problem. Entrepreneurship is not a pursuit of money. You're going to fail just because it's really hard and you probably won't make money for a long time. But the thing is it's about problem solving, right? And so when you decide to start something, definitely just go out and for us, it was like, we knew there was roughly a problem in education, but we had no idea the depth of, you know, what certain parents are feeling, you know, how difficult it was, what the challenges were. And the more you listen, the more you can kind of like figure out what the pain points are. And that's the key to entrepreneurship, is solving for those pain points.
And do you feel this kind of exploration has prepared you for life more than, let's say, a college education?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say so. I mean, I think it maybe not as much, hard to say about life because, you know, it depends on whose life it is. But I think for the workforce, definitely to have like a good paying job in terms of like my actual skills. I would say that this has prepared me better.
And there's something so unique about like the accountability, for example, like, you know, Jake and I now have people who believe in the work we're doing. We have employees, and that's a reason to wake up in the morning, right? Where it's like, I don't care if I'm having a rough day, like we're a team, people are looking up to us and like we have something. And so definitely it really puts you in a responsible position. And I think just having more responsibility teaches you so many life skills.
So I'm just trying to think about how to kind of make your project pop. And just as a possible thought, you know, the Magic Leap video of the whale jumping in the gym, that got so much attention. Have you thought of having like one cool, like super cool demo that might hopefully make it go viral?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yes, you know, we've actually put out a small demo video on our website. But the problem is that we don't have like the technical capacity, like, or the funding. It's really a matter of funding to create like those elaborate animations in AR. So it's, you know, it's not, I don't think that we have anything to offer, like any small snippet like that right now that we could offer that would really make jaws drop. But
I think you wouldn't want to compete on technical because, yeah, Magic Leap had a ridiculous amount of money. But I would think it'd be more about something pedagogical. If you could figure something where every parent would get, A, my kid would think this is cool, and B, they would actually be learning something. If you could even do a simple demo like that, that was like absolute home run, that would be very effective marketing.
oh yeah. I mean, yeah, I definitely agree.
And kind of worth, right, what would it be? And you guys know kind of your capabilities now and say 2 months from now or 3 months from now or whatever. But I think, one of the obstacles you face, they're huge obstacles. Education in some ways is one of the most conservative fields on earth. So there are huge obstacles anyway, but I think a lot of parents really don't get it. They can't imagine it. And so I think one of your struggles is having them, having a scene where they would get it, just something so that, hits their head. And ideally something where the kids say it's cool too.
Yeah, and maybe like some top educator, writing about it, saying, yes, your kid needs this.
Or better yet, a celebrity. Forget educators. Do you have any celebrities in your network? I would go all out celebrities.
Maybe.
Since the theme is when school's not working, maybe each of you could say the biggest way in which you think school is not working in today's world as kind of a closing thought.
The biggest way that I would say school is not working is that we're using one measuring stick to assess every student, and we're failing to measure up on our own measuring stick. So it's broad-based education, one size fits all, doesn't work.
I would agree, but there again, I'm hearing Ed the radical as opposed to Ed the Common Core guy.
I mean, like this is it's, we play by the rules and win on the current rules, and then we can rewrite the rules. That's just part of the way we see it. Yeah.
And are you talking for your generation here?
And we're not trying to, introduce complex technology to people who grew up on different technology. That's again why we're starting with this K-5 age group, is that hopefully they become accustomed to a mixed reality way of learning about the world and, growing up with that next generation.
Yeah. And I think the other important thing to note is that, especially like kindergarten, first grade, second grade, yes, we are aligned to the Common Core, but like the common core math skills in kindergarten, first grade, second grade are really things you probably should know. Like that's pretty basic stuff. And while I don't think that any student should have to learn it by the time they're 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. It's probably stuff that you should understand. But I think for me the biggest problem with the current schools is that who says that you get a certain grade and you can't you shouldn't be able to go back and change it. If I let's say I get a D in 9th grade math or something, and then 10th grade, 11th grade, I learn it and I go back and I ace the final, I still know as much as the kid next to me who has an A on his transcript, but it's just now I'm just that much worse off, and it's not really a reflection of anything that I really did.
Yeah, totally agreed. I won't speak for Kathy, but my heart is totally in terms of forget the system, it's a rotting corpse, it's going to die. And just practically, I'm glad early on you realized that marketing to districts is really a long, slow, painful slog. And especially if you're doing something out of the box. I'll give you one quick anecdote. Years ago, I knew what was at the time the leading ed tech software company, and they had to deliberately design their software so that teachers would have a role to play. Because even though they could completely do it without the teachers, public schools would not adopt it unless there was kind of a gratuitous role for the teachers to play in the software development. And so that's one of, no doubt, thousands of games you have to play. So if you can make this a consumer product, and freemium model with premium, cool, what you're doing, you can have cool features. So you could be freemium forever and just lots of cool upgrades so that even the poorest kids maybe get the basic thing. And then, the sky's the limit on the upside. So, but thanks for joining the show. I'm Michael Strong, When School's Not Working. And thank you for joining us.
Hold on one second before we go. I want our audience to be able to find you. So where can they, what's your website? And
Yeah,
how can they connect with you?
absolutely. Our website is redwood-learning.com. And then you can find us on Redwood Learning, all lowercase, no punctuation, on Instagram, and on Facebook as well at Redwood Learning.
And then to reach out to us, we are really, sourcing thoughts from the community. We're gonna, we'd be lying if we said we knew exactly what we were doing, but we need the help of, all educators, teachers, and parents to join. And so our email is redwood@virginia.edu. Yeah, and our website has contact. So would love to be in touch with anyone who's interested in our mission and what we're doing.
And how can they download your app?
It's called Redwood AR on the App Store. And we would be thrilled if you all would download it and give us any feedback you have. We would always looking to iterate and change things wherever need be.
Super cool. Super cool. Thank you so much, Kath. Kath is my conscience. She remembers these things. But thanks for joining us, Jake and Ed. And we'll see you next week on When School's Not Working.
Great.
Thank
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.